Sciences in Florida, and this is the 21st of February 1998, and we're redoing parts of the tape that we did on February the 20th at 9:45 in the morning yesterday. And I'd like to preface this by saying that I'm stating my opinions, and my opinions do not necessarily coincide with Dean Stonier's or the Global Sciences or the beautiful Holiday Inn hotel here. And what I'm going to talk about today is what, in my opinion, was the most remarkable medical, I used to think discovery, but it's actually a rediscovery, that we may have seen in this generation, or at least for 100 years. And it has to do basically with a new paradigm in medicine. And that paradigm, which emerged at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City in the spring of 1990, was that all disease-causing bacteria, microbes, germs, pathogens, parasites, and viruses are completely controllable by electrification of the blood. And that means that if you put a very small current, typically 50 to 100 microamperes, millions of an ampere through the blood, it somehow alters the outer protein layer of any parasites known, any germs, any bacteria, so they can no longer attach to human cells, reproduce themselves, use those cells to reproduce their own RNA, DNA, and they die, are neutralized in the blood. The body flushes them out through the kidneys, the liver, the lymph, and you're well. Now, when I first read about this, and incidentally, you might find this interesting that it's only been mentioned about 3 times that I know of in the press since its invention, and this happens to be the greatest discovery in medicine that, in my opinion, has been done well forever. The first article on this was in the March 20th, 1991 Science News, page 247, and it announced that Dr. Stephen Kaali, Kaali, and his colleagues at Albert Einstein College of Medicine had discovered that if they put a couple of wires in a Petri dish containing a high concentration of human blood and HIV, that the HIV virus could no longer attach to those cells. That meant that they had a universal cure for AIDS. But how many times have you read in the press that there is no cure for AIDS? That the government has spent $1.2 to $1.3 billion in researching antibiotics and researching vaccines and researching chemicals that are supposed to slow this down. And the best that I know of that they have come up with to date are the combination therapies. They're called cocktails. And Dr. Wu was made Man of the Year a year and a half ago for pointing out that when you combined AZT, DDI, DD5, you could cut down the AIDS count in the blood tremendously. But what you probably haven't read is the latest research that reveals that a third of AIDS patients cannot take these combination therapies because of gastrointestinal upsets. Another third of them cannot take the viruses because, the antivirals, because it does nothing. They don't get any better, they don't get any worse. And the third that can take them, which represent $5,000 to $20,000 a year in income for the pharmaceutical houses, will very rapidly die the moment they stop taking them. Why? Because the viruses left in the blood are so virulent that they have the power of overpowering the patient in just a few days, and they will die of HIV of a much more virulent form. Don't forget, the HIV mutates very, very rapidly, one of the most rapidly mutating retroviruses known. And so it's rather strange that since their discovery, only 3 or 4 articles have appeared. An interesting article did appear in the Houston Post on Wednesday, March 20th, 1991, in which they announced the discovery. And then later, in Longevity magazine, December 1992, page 14, in which Dr. Colley and his colleagues tried to backtrack the discovery, and they say right in this article that it will not be ready for 15 years because it hasn't been researched. The truth is, it has been researched, it does work, it can be applied today. So this 15 years appears to me to be the product of suppression of the information. Somebody doesn't want this information out here, and if people have accidentally heard about it, they've got to tell them, no, it's not ready yet, it doesn't work, etc. Well, in about 1991, I heard about this article, the one in Science News, and I ran to the library to get it, and it was gone. We tried a number of libraries in Orange County, California. Finally, from a librarian, got one of their reserve copies of Science News. So I wrote to the college, and I asked for a copy of the paper. I'm a doctor, not a medical doctor, a DSc, Doctor of Science. If I could have a copy of the paper, which was published in the spring edition of the Conference of Combination Therapies in Washington, D.C., I was amazed to find that it didn't exist. It had been apparently removed from the journals, the proceedings. So I started with a private investigator to find an attendee at the conference that happened to have a copy of this paper, and we found it. It existed. It had been written by Dr. Colley, K-A-A-L-I, and Associates, and it gave me the basic information that they had made this discovery, and it later turned out not to be a discovery at all. It was a total rediscovery. It did work. Now, who would like to see this information suppressed? Well, just guess what this is going to do in decimating the incomes of the medical profession, the doctors, and cutting the incomes of the pharmaceutical houses to practically nothing. So what I did is I designed and built apparatus for doing this work at home. And you can cure yourself at home with no doctors, no nurses, no drugs, no herbs, no pharmaceuticals, easily. And at the time we thought about 21 days, now it's about 4 to 5. But this is the original article that I wrote and published and gave away. I never charged anyone a nickel for this work. And because 10-year-old kids who were computer nerds could build it, but some people couldn't, we published a complete parts list, which you take to Radio Shack, put on the counter, and if you don't know what a resistor is, you let the clerk get it for you, and it costs 15 cents. 100K pot costs $1.34, etc. But with this complete parts list, and any 10-year-old kid who knows which end of a soldering iron to hold, you can cure yourself. Now, this is pretty remarkable because the message here is basically take back your power. You yourself have the sovereign power over controlling any infectious disease. Now, diabetes is not considered an infectious disease, multiple sclerosis, etc., 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 broken bones. But if your disease is based on any infection from any known or unknown parasite, virus, germ, fungus, it will cure it. But instead of using the word cure, I'm surely supposed to use the word spontaneous remission, because if you use the word cure and you're not a medical doctor, it's a felony in most of the states, including the one where I live. So my goal today is to give all the people who want, and this is about 15% of you, You'd think that anyone wants to get healed, but they don't. Anyone doesn't. 85% of the gross population in this culture, Judeo-Christian background, are known to have a death wish. And if they have a death wish, there's nothing you can do to convince their conscious mind, because the death wish is unconscious, to make the person get better unless he chooses to, he or she. So what you do here, and you'll notice on page 7 of the book, which gives away all the secrets, we have liberally borrowed from Gray's Anatomy, and we have drawings here of the paths of the blood. And the objective is to get as much electricity into the blood as possible and waste as little of the electricity as possible in the surrounding tissue or flesh. So this is very, very simple to do. And after experimenting with numerous types of electrodes, TENS electrodes, transcutaneous nerve stimulation, etc., we wound up with little electrodes which are pieces of stainless steel rod exactly 1 1/4 inches long and 3/32 of an inch in diameter. We wrap these 2 stainless steel electrodes with 2.5 turns of cotton. It has to be pure cotton. It can't be silk, it can't be nylon, it can't be polyester, but cotton, which is hygroscopic, hygroscopic. You dip these in salt water, very delicate of the skin, so we can put the electricity into the blood and not into the tissue. And the most convenient way of doing this is to take your pulse on the radial, radial artery, and on the ulnar, that's on the opposite side of the inside of the same wrist. And why can you feel the pulse there? Because the arteries, not veins, the arteries avoid the bones in the wrist by coming close to the surface. And if the blood is going through these arteries close to the surface, it's a very, very simple thing to get electricity into them. And you don't have to use a hypodermic needle. You don't have to use surgery, which we'll show you in the patents later. You do this in what medicine calls in vivo. That means the apparatus is outside of the body. The blood stays in the body where it belongs. So let's put these electrodes, which were sewn to this piece of stretch neoprene, and take a little box, which Russ Toulage Soda Instruments, SOTA, in Canada makes. And this little box has a 9-volt battery inside, has an attenuator, volume control, on the outside. The 9 volts is multiplied in a voltage multiplier to 27 volts, which is what it takes to get the electricity into the blood, not the skin. And you see here 2 little lights flashing, a red and a green, which indicate that the battery is working. The voltage is reversing polarity, so it will not damage the blood by electronic electrophoresis, electroplating. And we put this on our arm. Very simple, with a piece of stretch fabric and Velcro, which you can make yourselves. And if I weren't all thumbs right now, we'll show you how easy this is to do and cause spontaneous remissions of any number of known diseases. You then position the 2 saltwater wet electrodes over the radial and the ulnar arteries where you feel your pulse, and you plug it into the box. Turn it on, adjust the amplitude, the intensity, to the point where it's comfortable. And then if you're shy, you might choose to pull your sleeve down, and nobody knows that you're wearing the most powerful medical tool invented in this century. And what this is doing is putting this mild current, 50 to 100 microamperes, into your circulating blood, and therefore eliminating all, I hate this word because I used to be a physicist, all parasites, viruses, fungi, germs, pathogens. And it's doing this by putting this small electrical potential into the arteries, in this case on the arm, as you can clearly see in these pictures from Gray's Anatomy. Now, what have we done? We've managed to electrify approximately 40 to 60 cc of blood flowing in this arm. Now, you remember from high school that the average adult has about 8 pints of blood in his 150-pound body, that these 8 pints of blood circulate through the entire body once about every 9 or 10 seconds. In other words, every drop of blood in your body, the drop that's in my earlobe, etc., will flow past these electrodes, become electrified, and anything in these blood volumes is totally eliminated. Now, it's interesting that Colley and his colleagues made this discovery in 1990, and on February 23rd, 1993, a U.S. patent number 5188738 was issued to these medical doctors, particularly Dr. Colley, by the U.S. Government Patent Office. Now, I think I'd better read something to you here, which you might find extremely interesting, and then we'll zoom in to look at a couple of pictures in the patent. Don't forget, we're looking at a U.S. government document which is legal material in any court in the world. Any civilized court takes a U.S. patent as having been investigated by the examiners, our Department of Commerce. So let's read a couple of things in this patent, which is entitled Alternating Current Supplied Electrically by Electrically Conductive Method and System for Treatment of Blood and Other Body Fluids and or Synthetic Fluids with Electric Forces. They say here, we're reading in column 1, line 30, because of this problem, the present invention has been devised to attenuate any bacteria, virus, including AIDS, HIV, right there in the patent, parasites and or fungus contained in blood, either contributed by a donor to the point where such contaminant is rendered ineffective for infecting a normally healthy human cell, but does not make the blood biologically unfit for use in humans. They go on in column 2, line 9, contaminants, bacteria, virus, fungus, and or parasites contained in the blood or other bodily fluids are rendered ineffective to infect and or affect normally healthy human cells. Now, if this information has been around in the professional press, the patent office, the journals, which you've never read about, why hasn't your doctor told you about this? Well, if you have cancer, and this cures cancer, and we have the clinical proof right here. Cancer is not an infectious disease exactly, but when you unload your immune system, the cancer gets well. We have this happening in dozens and dozens of cases. If you have cancer and go to the conventional allopathic treatment of surgery and radiation and chemotherapy, you'll be told by the Department of Commerce, the government agencies, that the mean median cost, the average cost of the cancer, is $375,000. That includes the surgery, the chemotherapy, the anesthetologist, the hospital, the radiation. But wait a minute. I happened to buy a package of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit chewing gum at the Chicago airport a couple of months ago for $1.32. This nickel package of chewing gum was marked up for the airport sales, taxed, service charged. And what I'd like to tell you is that $1.32 is about what at that time this Duracell alkaline 2U6 9-volt transistor radio battery cost you. And this battery will cure a number of patients of incurable diseases, including tuberculosis, hepatitis, Epstein-Barr, herpes, and HIV, and many other emerging viruses about which you have never heard and some of which you have. This includes Ebola, hantavirus, the viruses that will be used, if it happens, in biological warfare, including botulism, anthrax, etc. And the systems which we're going to show you today will do this for you, and we've outlined all four of the systems. Number one consists of blood cleaning. Number two, of magnetic pulsing, which we'll demonstrate here in a couple of minutes. Russ will show you. Number three, making silver colloids and ingesting them, drinking the colloid water every day. And number four, ozone. And Russ has a beautiful little ozone generator here, which sells for under $300, where if you normally go to a health fair, the medical ozone generators cost from $6,000 to $7,000 and are not nearly as effective or powerful as enough to go in your coat pocket. And this happens to be a water ozonizer that I designed and a friend put together. We'll demonstrate how these work and why they work toward the end of this lecture. Now, four things, again, I repeat, are all that are required to do these cures at home. What does this mean? You never have to waste your time and money going and seeing a doctor or a nurse or a chiropractor or a homeopathy practitioner, naturopath, an herbalist. This works almost every single time that it is used. We have thousands of, well, hundreds right now of testimonials in the form of letters. We have a number of PCR tests, which we'll show you tonight. Polymerase chain reaction, which counts the particles of HIV per milliliter per cubic centimeter of human blood. We have the befores and afters. And if you're a medical professional, you can get your hands on these, look at all of the blood testing that went in along the way. So what I'm going to do for the camera now is just hold these up for a second so you see that we have them. This is not just conversation, it's not metaphysical, pardon the word, bullshit. But these happen to be PCR tests. Polymerase chain reaction tests named by Kary Mullis, who got the Nobel Prize for discovering this test in 1993. Let's take one of these, for example, while we're on the subject. And this chap happened to have an initial HIV, according to PCR, of 418,478 particles of living virulent HIV in his blood. He was quite laden down with symptoms. On the 5th of, I guess this was September 1995, and 21 days later, no, not that, but about 2 months later, on 11/3/95, his PCR, polymerase chain count, was less than 100 particles of HIV per milliliter in his blood. He was cured. He was symptom-free. He went back to work, has been at work ever since 1995 with no symptoms whatsoever. And where have you read that there is no cure for HIV, no cure for AIDS? It was presumed that HIV was the cause of AIDS. Now, this would be unusual if we had only 1 or 10 or 20 of these. Instead, we have hundreds of these from hospitals all over the United States. We have them here from a hospital in New York. This is a report that the dying woman's brother sent to us. She's now well and back at work. This one happens to be from Specialty Laboratories in Santa Monica, California, showing a complete AIDS cure. This one happens to be from the Pathology Laboratory at the Jewish Memorial Hospital in New York City, showing an HIV cure. In other words, this isn't a fluke, a freak of nature. It was interesting to note that the first of these tests, which were sent in 1995 to this IDL laboratory in San Leandro, California, were not returned to the doctors, the MDs, who took the tests, took the blood, put it on dry ice and shipped them, until considerably after they were remained. What happened? Well, you have sent us some blood here which shows, apparently, a cure for AIDS. You people know that there's no such thing as a cure for AIDS. What are you trying to do? Make this laboratory look silly? We can't return these results. What they were saying, it wasn't politically correct to mention that there were results. What they did next, they had the secretaries at this San Leandro, California laboratory, call the secretaries in our hospital in Newport Beach, California. What are you guys doing down there? Well, our secretaries were told not to tell. This was a big secret. Oh, we just sent in some before and after blood. Oh, that's what you said, but look, these people are cured. That's impossible. We don't want to send these tests back. It'll make us look silly when you reveal that you're playing a joke on us. No, we're not playing a joke on you. This is real. After stacks of these tests, they began returning them in real time when we told them what we were doing. But what happened to me? The board of directors called me into a meeting at the hospital, said, "You'll have to stay away from us, Bob. What you're doing is not FDA approved. Our doctors could lose their licenses if they're caught using a non-FDA approved modality. This is an embarrassment to us. You've insisted that you not charge the patients anything for the protocol. You're cutting into our living. Get out of here and don't come back." Now, you would think that doctors would welcome a cure for incurable diseases. Just last week, a woman in California got the flesh-eating form of strep, fasciolatus, etc. And one at a time, they amputated both of her legs, they amputated her finger, they did surgery on the flesh, which was being destroyed by this strain-resistant strep. And they could have cured her in 2 days with this blood cleaning, and she would have still had her legs. She was still in intensive care in a hospital in California. They have strains of tuberculosis now which do not respond to the most powerful antibiotics known, namely the drip in their blood, and they're dying. They could be cured in 2 days with blood cleansing, and you'll never hear about it, you'll never read about it in the popular press because it is not politically correct. And I guess most of you know that penicillin, the miracle worker, was not invented by Dr. Lord Fleming in the late 30s, early 40s. It was invented in 1882 in Brazil, published as a matter of record in their medical journals at that time, and disbelieved by 99% of the doctors, just like the doctors disbelieved the circulation of blood, which was discovered, and many other things, and then rediscovered, and because of an accident it was tested and found to cure gonorrhea and syphilis. Now we have penicillin in all the drugstores, manufactured before it was in public domain by the pharmaceutical houses, etc. Now the same thing is happening with blood electrification. And again, we do 4 things. We electrify the blood, which is the most rapid possible way to cure all known infectious diseases that I personally know of. We follow this by magnetic pulsing, which will be demonstrated in just a minute by Russ of Soda Instruments in Vancouver, Canada. We follow it by drinking silver colloid water, which you make yourself at home for 1/10 of a penny a gallon. It's strange to note, when I was a kid, a gallon of gas was 10 cents, 10 gallons for $1. And now gasoline is $1.32 or so. And the water costs 800 times more than the silver colloid. A gallon of distilled water is 80 cents, sparklets, triplets. And 80 cents is 800 times more powerful than the silver colloid, which is the most powerful disease-killing bactericide known. So why don't we turn this over to Russ now, and he'll tell us about the evolution and current status of the magnetic pulsing, which is used to get the dead and dying viruses out of the body and discarded where they belong.
Okay, Bob. Hopefully this will reach here. There we are. What I'd like to demonstrate for you is the use of a magnetic pulse generator. And what I have here is a box that will basically charge up a large photoflash capacitor, discharge it by pressing this button, and the energy stored in this unit will be discharged into this coil. This is an open coil for demonstration purposes. The actual unit that we do sell is enclosed for safety's sake because it generates 350 volts and 105 amperes. It will be discharged in 2.5 milliseconds into this core, which will create a tremendous magnetic field in the neighborhood of 22,000 Gauss. To do the demonstration, we have a 3/8 inch truck washer, standard fare that you can get from your local hardware store. I'm going to be placing it in the center of the core, and when the energy is discharged into the coil, a back EMF, that's electromotive force for those who understand the electrical terms, are going to be generated in this washer. It will oppose the primary magnetic field, and we should see some action. You might want to zoom out on this, Mark. And we will place it in the core. We will turn the unit on, fully charged, and off it goes. If one of our assistants could please bring that back. Thank you very much. And we'll do one more. All right, and if we'll try that again, if you're ready, we will discharge, and off it goes again, about 15 feet away, and seems to take half the equipment with it. It's incredibly powerful. Just kidding. We will again demonstrate the magnetic pulse. We have the washer in the center of the coil, and if you're ready to go, I will now give a good demonstration. There's a nice parabolic curve that it does do. And what exactly does this unit do? In actual use, we would be taking the unit, waiting for the charge, pushing the button, discharging it in the various areas of the body, limb system, targeted areas. It can be used all throughout the body. And what it does is, by the same scientific principle that through that washer, it's going to create microelectric currents deep within the tissues of the body where it is centered over this coil due to a moving magnetic field, which is very important. It's not like permanent magnet therapy. It is a moving magnetic field which causes a small current, 50 to 100 microamperes as outlined in the patent, to be generated deep within the tissues, which effectively does the neutralization of the parasites, viruses, bacteria, fungi, etc.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
We wondered how to eliminate the parasites, fungus, bacteria that were latent and germinating in the flesh, and this will do it. But, as you recall, nobody has ever died of AIDS. They've all died of infectious secondary diseases. They're called opportunistic infections, and there are 23 of them that are listed as being part and parcel of HIV or AIDS. How do we get rid of those? How do we protect this person while he's recovering? I'm going to do it right now. Let's take a glass of water. This is tap water. Let's take a couple of solid silver wires. Don't get the wires at a jewelry store. They don't sell silver. They sell sterling silver, which is nitrate. And before we do this, let's shine a laser light through this, and you will see that the water is fairly clear, although it's Orlando, Florida tap water. You don't see many backscatter particles in the water. So if we put these electrodes with 27 volts across them into the water now for about 2 to 3 minutes, we'll have made, in 8 ounces of water at 70 degrees Fahrenheit, we would have made a silver colloid solution, which if you take to a laboratory measures 2 to 3 parts per million, which is all you need for curing most diseases. 650 of them, in fact, all told. So while we're waiting, and you may be able to see a little cloud of fog coming off the anode, the positive electrode, which is 0.001 micron silver colloid, and that's about the finest you can possibly get. This is known as ionic silver. Don't waste your time with other colloids like gold, colloid, etc. So let's see what we've done to this water here. About how many minutes do we have there?
Another couple minutes.
Oh, let's
amount of water, if you'd like.
Give it another minute, or?
Here.
Well, let's do it now.
Alrighty.
You recall what this water looked like just a few seconds ago. If my laser hasn't burned out here. Now, we can see that the water is a little bit cloudy, and you've got an almost solid beam of light. This is called the Tyndall, Tyndall, or the Rayleigh, Rayleigh effect. And we say, to your health. Now, this will definitely protect most people from opportunistic diseases, except we had another problem. Some of the patients we worked with were so sick it required 2 attendants to lift them from their bed to the potty. And when we killed off or eliminated or neutralized the billions and billions and billions of viral cells in their bodies. They became terribly sick in their own waste products. It took about 21 days to cure them. So let's do something here. Russ, do you want to demonstrate your unit, because that's available right now? And what we're going to do is collect ozone from the air. The air we breathe is 19% oxygen. Put it through a pump, put it through an ozone generator, which Russ will show you, and bubble it through the water, and the ozone will be dissolved in the water, which you drink. You have the equivalent of an oxygen bar, which is springing up all over Tokyo and New York City. And when we turn this on, you'll notice,
just plug it in there.
Okay, that this little aeration stone that's used in aquariums for fish will begin bubbling. Can you see that on camera all right? We'll try to get this on the camera side of the glass. Now, the ozone is highly soluble in water, but it has a half-life of about 20 minutes in warm water, an hour or so in cold, chilled ice water. The ozone is the greatest detoxifying agent known to man. Some cities in Germany use ozone to clean their water instead of chlorine, other things that we do. Now, instead of taking 21 days to cure these dying patients, it can be done in about 4 or 5 days, because when they take ozone into their body, the ozone, just like oxygen, oxidizes the waste products, turns them into H2O and CO2, and they don't have pus running down their faces from ruptured cysts under their scalp. Their legs aren't scratching and breathing and throwing off toxins. The skin is the second most important. Got the microphone there? Oh, I have it. Skin is the second most important organ of elimination known, next to the lymph fluid and tissue. Now we have produced quite a few percentage of ozone in water, and we don't have to sit in an oxygen bar in Tokyo or New York and breathe it for $1 a minute, $20 for 20 minutes. We don't have to take a $1,500 an hour or up to $3,000 an hour oxygen pressure hyperbaric chamber in New York. So if we drink this now, we'll detoxify in a couple of days and eliminate poisons which have been in your body for many years. So these are the 4 items, and you think we have about 3 or 4 minutes left, or are we close to the...
We have to use the room now. So we have to clear out.
Okay, so we're out of here.
We're out of time.
This is the gist. I've shown you most of the features we use in the cure. If you want, you can get a copy of this paper, which is How to Cure All Diseases at Home with No Doctors, for $1.32. Or you can buy a unit from Soda Instruments, whose phone number is 1-800-224-0242, and they can give you all the rest of the information you need. So thank you very much. We have to clear the room now, and we'll see you next year.